What flavour of council are you? I did miss what party.
Oh, I'm happy to say I'm Lib Dem project. I don't think it's totally relevant.
Oh, I don't know. It's interesting. I think it's really interesting.
I'm a Liberal, I should say, rather than Lib Dem if it comes to it. We have to be absolutely honest.
So I'm Michelle Wilkinson from Meg Parish, which is actually, you're in it. The university is part of our parish. We as Parish Council act in a non-political way. We are just there to actually administer the village in the necessary capacity. I've only been on it for about 2 years, but I come from a long line of parish councillors and town mayors, and it's been in the blood for a couple of 100 years. Everybody has to do their bit at some point. So
Does the university have its own generator?
I wouldn't know. All we get is planning application after planning application after planning application. We are just a small village parish council, and we've all had to come up to the standard of actually being able to write quite, able planning reports because of the extent of this university. So it's quite an interesting learning curve for a little parish, and it's a lot more work than a normal village parish would probably have, because this university is consistently putting in planning applications, or developers are putting in applications for accommodation.
Heavy workload for the size of your parish.
Yeah, very heavy workload.
Oh.
I'm Sue Allen. I'm just I don't represent, as it were, any councils or anything. I live in Truro. I do a lot of environmental work, so I work mostly with butterfly conservation, doing surveying and conservation, but also with the Wildlife Trust, and I do things with children as well.
Would you like to rephrase that last?
Well, you take them out and point out birds and butterflies and try and get them engaged in it.
Yes.
That's the word. I am a bit passionate about education, but the thing about education is that it isn't a tick box thing, is it?
No.
Well, my name's Gemma Turner. I'm from Newquay area as well. I live in Holywell Bay. I am the community leader for Plastic Free Newquay. I work with Pat Smith at Final Straw Cornwall, and potentially looking at getting on the parish council circuit, but that's to be explored yet. I don't know if I have the time with my full-time job, but we'll see.
Which parish were you aiming for? Newquay's got a vacancy.
Yes, that's what I was looking
Co-option.
at. So we'll see.
Bring down the average age.
Yeah.
No, I brought down the average age, and I'm over 50. But funnily enough, when I first started, there were 2 other women parish councillors, and now there are only 3 men left on our parish council. The rest are all women. So we're getting a lot of things done now. Finally, after 20 years.
Hi, I'm Fiona Hodges, from a little parish called Poundstock, just south of Bude on the north coast, so almost into Devon. But we are in Cornwall, just. I'm not a councillor. I've only lived in Poundstock itself for 5 years, but I've joined the NDP steering group, and I've literally only been in it for 2 months, so this is all completely new to me. Today has kind of blown my mind, but I'm on the subcommittee of the landscape and environment, so we're going to be doing a lot of mapping, so I'm hoping I'll learn a lot from this afternoon, but yeah.
Cool. Okay, in a minute I'm going to do a round robin, and the first thing that'll go on the whiteboard is I'm going to write down your names, so I have an idea of not forget them, and maybe ask one thing that you might want to get out today, so you can have a little think about that while I introduce myself. My name's Julian. I work for an organisation called Shared Assets. That's a think and do tank, based in London. And our focus is on common good land use with shared benefits. So land's often one of 2 things. It's either protected or developed, mostly for profit, mostly for housing. And there's very little in between in terms of meeting our needs, in terms of green spaces, spaces for growing, health and well-being, community energy generation, but then also we do need housing, My particular role with Shared Assets is developing this, which is our mapping application called Land Explorer, and it's designed to help your community find places to live, work, play, generate, and grow. So all of those things that we need. We're grant funded to date, and so we're just considering how best we roll out the application as a business. What we're looking to do is potentially make charges for access to it to the kind of professionals that work supporting community-led development. So that might be architects, planners, surveyors, etc. To make it as free or as accessible as possible to those that are involved in community-led development. So community-led development normally starts with information and data. Where is it? What does it look like? All of these kind of things. And that data is often it's difficult to find. It's behind a paywall. You need lots of time and patience. You probably need some skills. But most developers, for-profit developers, so your Persimmons of this world, etc., will have all of those in spades. So they're the ones that get access to this information. Where's the public land for sale? There's lots of it at the moment. So we're looking to integrate, public land for sale.
Do you work with the Cornwall Council mapping service, which is very good, but it doesn't provide that sort of information?
We haven't yet.
You should do it.
Well, yes, we absolutely should. I'm very interested to have those conversations to work with local authorities. In terms of government,
It's pretty accessible.
so working with variety of government corporations, organisations. So we've got some data from the Environment Agency, Forest Estate Soils, and we're working with Ordnance Survey and Land Registry. So in terms of mapping, and also who owns it, it's also a very important thing. So very quickly, again starting here. So forgive me if I don't remember your name. So
I'm Joanna.
Joanna.
And the mapping I'm really interested in is the cliff edge, because that's one of our big things, is cliff edge development.
Cliff.
And it's really the erosion lines, the end-serm stuff pull out. I'm not sure whether this is actually going to do that, but
It doesn't yet, but part of today is me discovering what people need.
Yeah.
And what we can do is go away with some of our data scientists and we can research what data is available, and then we can start to put that on there. It was really, really scary and interesting to find out today that best case, we might be looking at 20 metre sea rise, and at worst case 100 metre. So in terms of our contours and our coastal regions, what that will actually, it would be good to represent what that...
The cliffs will fall long before the water goes up.
Absolutely, yeah, but it would be interesting to visualise what that actually means, and that might communicate some of this really urgent message that we've got about what we need to do. I think it's something like 70 to 80% of the world's population live in coastal cities. So in terms of that migration, again, that people talked about, if we've got 70% of the world's population going to be underwater in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, logistically we don't have the capacity to help all of those people move. So sort of cliff edge and erosion.
Yeah.
Okay. Michelle.
Meg Parish. We haven't even had our first neighbourhood plan meeting yet.
Okay.
We will be deciding on the date this week. So it's literally a case of how do I've got Meg Parish to map and understand, so that the community can decide what they want to do with it, I suppose.
Where are all the grants that are available, and getting a good consultant in?
Yes, I've got a great name of a consultant from Parish Clerk today, who's done 3 of her parishes, so I think that's a good one. But I've also sat in on Penryn Neighbourhood Plan. We've got the Morland Smith Neighbourhood Plan people coming to speak to us this Thursday. So I've got one of the speakers here is going to be on my neighbourhood plan committee.
Oh really? Fantastic.
So I think Mark, who's doing one of the other workshops.
Oh wow,
So
cool.
I think we're quite fortunate, and we have another speaker this morning, Stefan. He's in the village as well.
Oh, excellent.
His wife is a parish councillor, so yes, so we've got quite a good.
That's a good skill set.
Yeah, it is. I sort of, it's taken 2 years to get the parish
You need a
into.
driver.
It's taken 2 years to get the parish to the point of getting this far, and it's probably because of our recent
Uh-huh.
Antron Way development threatening quarry that has brought all these sabre rattlers out of the parish and
Mm.
wanting to fight for what we've got.
Right. Cool. Okay.
Hi, I'm Sue.
Sue.
I'm
Sue.
just a bit passionate about protecting our landscapes and environment, but the only way to do that really is to get people to engage with them. You know, people. It's all connected with well-being, isn't it? Being in the
It is.
countryside, being able to get out and walking, joined up landscapes. You know.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Yeah, health and well-being. I mean, it's documented that a 5-minute walk in a park can positively affect your mental health for hours afterwards. Absolutely documented. I think national planning policy framework is you should be certainly in an urban environment, no more than 5-minute walk from a green space. It's not always the case, and there are as mentioned today as well, issues with obesity and diabetes that are directly related
And
to
mental well-being.
particularly mental well-being, that are directly related to correlation of space to go out, green spaces to go out, and what have you. Again, there was a lot of talk today in terms of making it cyclable, making it walkable. So in terms of a neighbourhood development plan, some of the things I'm particularly interested in is where we work. How do we get to work? Can we work remotely? Let's build in where we work into the fabric of our neighbourhood, our environment, so we can literally walk to work rather than have all these cars going to
Particularly out
different
in Cornwall
places.
where we have poor public transport and
yeah.
everybody has to get in their car, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel your pain on that one. I grew up in Suffolk and we had a bus on a Wednesday and a Saturday. So, okay,
My name's Gemma.
Gemma, is that with a J?
G.
G. Okay.
And I think I'm quite new to the neighbourhood planning full stop really.
Yeah.
And I think mapping obviously is a key tool to start before you kind of, I'd like to understand before I potentially get involved in A, setting one up, or B, getting involved in like a neighbourhood plan. And also as part of my sort of plastic-free sustainability work in Newquay, I want to try and do a lot more on land stuff, not just the beaches and coastline. So so that's maybe get the community involved in potentially trying to purchase certain areas to protect it. That's
Right.
long-term
cool.
goal, but
Yeah,
Very
great.
good building you want to knock
yeah,
down.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Hi, I'm Fiona.
Fiona.
Again, I haven't got a clue because I'm very new to this, so
No worries.
I want to know
We're all winging it.
what's
don't worry.
expected. I am on the Landscape and Environment Committee for the NDP in my parish, and our parish is largely rural. We've got like a heritage coastline at Malouk, which has got the I can't remember the correct terminology, but the way that the cliffs are formed, I think it's one of the.
Heritage coastline.
Something special.
It is something special site.
Okay.
Sorry, like I say, I'm new to this. And we've got an awful lot of woodland and farmland. We've just got such a mishmash of landscape, and I don't know where to start. I need some guidance.
That's okay. Special is fine for the heritage coastline. We won't use any more technical terms for that, mostly because I don't know them either. So special is great. And so you said woodland and farmland as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Joanna's interested in cliff edge development and erosion. Michelle, first neighbourhood development planning meeting. So mapping and understanding the parish, and kind of grants that might be available. I won't be able to answer that particular question, but we do have an expert in the room. Sue's passionate about landscape and the environment, particularly in terms of mental health and well-being. Gemma is interested in mapping, again new to neighbourhood development planning, and is interested in plastic-free Cornwall, or founded an organisation, particularly the coastline, very relevant. And Fiona Landscape and Environment Committee for her NDP, and they have a heritage coastline, a special one. So I'm going to dive in and just show you a little bit about. It's more of a product demonstration now, and then we can maybe sit down and just talk about what we could do moving forward. So, Land Explorer helps get information on land around you. It helps you find, access, and manage land. So, in terms of finding land, we're adding data from local authorities in terms of land for sale, private land for sale, and we'll also be adding land for sale from Homes England and other government organisations. You can search, view, draw, and share with the current application, and I'll show you how we do that, so I won't stick on this bit too long. These are some of our data partners. I mentioned Land Registry, Natural England, the Environment Agency, Ordnance Survey and Forestry Commission. Some of our supporters that we work with, so DataKind are our data scientists. Co-ops UK, we're really interested in becoming a co-op. We're not yet, but we've got a really interesting sort of value proposition in terms of sitting between the government corporations that produce all this data, the community organisations that really need this data, the professionals that work in the industry, and the workers who actually build the application. So there's a value proposition there. So we're interested in becoming a co-op, and as our community of users and members, you know, people like yourselves who are doing a neighbourhood development plan would be members of the cooperative. And so we'd actually develop what you need, so you'd have a direct say in the service that was actually provided. There's a lovely book called Wiconomics about that, which calls it prosumers. So you're actually producers and consumers. So what we're also really interested in is crowdsourcing data. So we're going to be building applications so you know, people on the ground can actually upload stuff and put their own data onto the map. And then these are some of the communities that we work with. So Making Local Woods Work, that's sort of forest schools and nice enterprises in woodland. Community Energy England, so that's sustainable energy generation. Big Local and Local Trust is a big lottery funded, they've funded about 150 communities around the country to improve their local neighbourhood. The National Community Land Trust Network, who do house building, but as community land trusts. Solidarity Economy Association, who look at cooperative associations and companies. Neighbourhood Planning, that in particular, that's Neighbourhood Planning London that we've done some work with. And during the last session, I asked a question: is there a national association for neighbourhood development planning? And the answer is no. And I think there's various parish and town council associations.
There is a Cornwall Council Neighbourhood Planning Unit.
Right. Okay.
And they will come out and support individual parishes in their plan. They were very useful to us in Newquay. Sort of wrote all our policies for us. And then they coordinate when you submit your plan and get the inspector and everything like that, all that admin. That's who you feed it into, and they sort of work out for you.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
I take it you're new to Cornwall.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I live in Newcastle, and I'm from Suffolk, so rarely been this far south. But I thought it was really important. I saw the event and got in touch and said, you know, love what you're doing. Can I come and get involved? And I'm really glad I did, because it's been fabulous so far. So you know, we all need spaces to live, work, play, generate, and grow. And what I'll do now is just log in and just give you a quick demonstration of where we are so far. As I say, I mean, we're not for profit. We've been grant funded to date. You know, we don't have any big investors, and we probably don't plan to have big investors, because generally the routes to capital available are via business angels and then venture capitalists. And what they want to see generally is same as property development, is a big bang for their buck.
So do you charge people to use your services if you're not for profit? Is it a charge that covers your costs, or?
So currently it's free. So you can use the system for sort of testing out what we're currently doing, giving us feedback in terms of the application. So we very much encourage you to tell us what you think and what you want, what your needs are. And as I say, moving forward, we're looking at commercial models that might support development in the future. Our objective is to keep it as free or as low cost as possible for community groups, for community-led development. So here we have Land Explorer. You can register very simply. You have a tool wheel up here that lets you do a variety of things. You can draw. You can look at a variety of data layers. You can find information on what you've drawn. You can create a new map. You can save a map, and you can share a map. So sharing a map will share it with your colleagues and co-workers and what have you. And so they can come and view the map that you might have drawn or found. And up here we've got just your standard things in terms of your account, in terms of your name, your password, your email address, and what have you. And then you've got any maps that have been shared with you, or any maps that you might have drawn. And I'm working on a variety of different projects at the moment. So I'll probably show you, probably show you a couple of three of these, just so you can get a flavour for it. And then we can maybe actually have a look directly at maybe your parish, Michelle, or whatever you want. We can start to see how it might help and actually see some of the information. So Wiki Farm, this is actually my dad's land in Suffolk. And this is a map that I've drawn out. And I have to say at this stage, we normally have more detail in the map, because we normally use Ordnance Survey mapping.
I was going to ask whether you build it on the top of Ordnance Survey.
We actually use their data directly, normally.
And if you had a map, would it then update as things are built?
It does,
Yeah.
indeed, yes. So we
Very
actually,
clever.
so it's direct to Ordnance Survey, and as theirs is updated, this is updated. Because of the licensing requirements with Ordnance Survey, this isn't Ordnance Survey's map.
No.
For today,
No,
but we're in discussions with them. I'm meeting them on Tuesday, and we've just applied to be part of their accelerator program, which is called Geovation.
You probably have to, when you do use it, you probably have to give a little cred to them.
You do indeed, and mostly you have to pay. You have to pay a license fee.
Yeah.
This is why none of this normally Ordnance Survey data is not free. There was a commitment in the budget. 2017, I think it was now, the Chancellor committed to making Ordnance Survey data free at the point of use for small to medium enterprises. And he allocated £80 million to do that, 40 million a year over 2 years. There's a cross-party commission in the House of Commons called the Geospatial Commission, and they met to decide what the announcement actually means, and also how Ordnance Survey might deliver it, and what products it might actually apply to. And the Geospatial Commission announced, I think May last year, that it would apply to Ordnance Survey master maps and their topography layer. So we've got a variety of layers. We've got transport, we've got water, topography, which includes contours and what have you, very, very detailed maps. And Ordnance Survey are going to take up to 12 months beyond that to actually implement. And the latest I've heard is possibly by early 2020. So that's currently where we are. And we're trying to negotiate with them at the moment to try and find out quite where we are in terms of licensing, how, what we can do in the meantime before that happens. So that's where we are with licensing. So this isn't actually an Ordnance Survey map, so it doesn't have quite as much detail as I was hoping to show you, but it's still helpful. So what I'll probably do is just flick to an aerial view, so you can actually get a sense of what we're looking at. So this is a village in Suffolk called Hopton, where I grew up. It's about 400 odd houses, very rural, 15 miles from the local town. Bus on a like I say when I was a boy, bus on a Wednesday and a Saturday. In the summer holidays, I used to cycle 13 miles every day there, and 26 miles a day just to go into the town to see my friends. So it's very, very rural neighbourhood. This is an adjoining field which is about 17 acres, which it doesn't form part of the farm. And my dad's in his 70s now, and so he's kind of got he had a farmhouse and a couple of acres which he's sold. But then he's retained this plot of land, which is about 7 acres, and kind of trying to decide what to do with it. And it's not large enough really to be a productive farm. And equally, the other options for it, again, how do you maintain some biodiversity, or what do you do? Do you sell it for development? I mean, that's the classic thing, isn't it? When if you're getting a bit older and it doesn't have much of a pension, etc. Is the equity that's involved in your house or the land. So sort of treating it as an investment rather than or even the terminology that we use to describe things like assets, as opposed to being custodians of a piece of land for future generations. So so I was really.
Can I just ask how your software has worked? So if you didn't have the white lines around it, it would look just like the rest of the map. So
yes, you're quite right.
Selected to highlight.
Yes. Yes, you're quite right. So this white bit that you're seeing now is what I've drawn. Yep. And I'll show you how you can draw, so how you can use some tools to draw, and then also some of the information that gives back. So yes, I've drawn around it, and I was kind of thinking, how could we productively use the land? And on the site there's some old farm buildings. So we have a barn. There's some stables, and this is an old dairy. And most of my youth, it was a horse-drawn farm. Everything was horse-drawn, and we were growing potatoes, and we were growing hay for the horses and what have you. And now it's been tenanted for the last few years, and mostly just kept for horse grazing. But again, that's sort of what can we use it for productively. So I'll just flick through some of these. So if I click on the outline, you can name an area, you can draw an area, you can give it a name. And if I click on the information, it then tells me that actually it's 5.2 acres. Now it's probably more like 7. When I told my dad, he was like, no, it's 7. And the reason for that is when we draw the shape, it just does a mathematical calculation of the area, and what it doesn't take into consideration is any undulation of the land. So actually, where you've got curvature of the land, you'll have a greater surface area. And I'll quickly just flick through some of these. So that would be a polytunnel. That's the neighbouring field, because I was interested in that. That's a large-scale monoculture, probably using pesticide. Yeah. So, if we want to do anything organic next door, that makes it problematic. I'm also curious who might own it, because I might approach them and say, well, can we rent that and do something on it? So this kind of thing. So that's interesting. That's the outline of the farm itself. Then we might put in some vehicle hard standing, an outside growing area for testing sort of permaculture stuff. This bit at the bottom, which is actually about 1.5 acres, 1.7 acres actually, the idea behind that is we would just completely leave it fallow, so as a stewardship, so just wildflowers. So lovely.
This is information you put in yourself, isn't it? It's not.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So this is the plan that I've drawn.
Yeah.
So again, if you're communicating a neighbourhood plan, you might draw up something similar, both to just consult within the locale. So you can share it with first of all, your group in terms of your committee, and then you might want to share it with the community, and publish this via email or what have you, as opposed to maybe something through the letterbox.
It's a really good visual tool.
Yeah.
Because our parish is so long and
sure.
You don't even know where your boundaries are. Whereas if you look at something like this, it can be really defined, can't it?
Absolutely.
So when you come to do your formal green spaces.
Yeah.
Our council used a similar sort of software. They paid for it.
Yeah.
And you basically draw around your
Mm.
your green space, your formal use
Yes.
is very, very closely legally defined. And first thing the inspector wanted from us was how many hectares is it? I didn't even know what a hectare was.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I'm an acres man because I grew up on a farm and of an age where it was acres.
Yeah.
But we have both hectares and acres on this, so
And
it
that's
does.
automatically calculated
Yes.
based on your.
And
Yes.
then you can name it, I assume.
Yes, you can. So
Which is the other thing she wanted.
absolutely, yeah. So you can click to name it, and you can also do other things like drop pins and stuff. So then an area for solar panels. Another polytunnel, that would be a workshop, and again that would be shared work, kind of shared. So this is kind of community on a microcosm, because this was me and my friends saying if we want to live in a little tiny community, what might it look like?
Yeah.
So neighbourhood planning is just this on a grander scale, you know.
Is there any public footpaths that run?
There
Alright.
are. We're hoping to map them at some stage.
That's really important,
Dan,
isn't it?
Dan mentioned look, because we want to try and help support community energy. And Dan mentioned when I was talking to him earlier, when you're siting a wind turbine, it has to be X distance from a bridle path, and I'm assuming that means the same from footpaths.
It's a really weird shaped village, this one.
Well, it's
built around the trees, and you have all this awful rounding or fill or infill. I'm not sure whether what you're doing there is
built on
either
a
rounding or
crossroads.
infill.
Built
Well,
round a crossroads.
this is a crossroads, so it's pretty much crossroads.
But you've got an area of either scrub or woodland there, haven't you, that borders on your...
This bit.
Yeah.
That's really interesting that you should mention that, because I'll tell you what that is. I'll skip the rest. We've got, in the plan we've got your shepherd's huts, an amphitheatre, fire pits, beehives, TPU, all of that kind of stuff. I'll skip that, and I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll just dive into some of the land data, because it's really interesting you mention this bit, because this is actually...
Agricultural land classification, that's
Yes,
worth its weight in gold.
absolutely. So I can flick that on. This is agricultural land classification.
So say 3A, 3B, all the rest of it.
Yep, so I know that it's pretty much grade 4 that we're in.
Wow.
Which isn't great, but also that means that we can probably improve that. So we can probably improve that. I mean, from working on it, I know it's a lot. Mostly, there's a lot of flint.
But the improving it, sometimes you don't want to improve it. If you say, the wildflower thing is, wildflowers do best on unimproved land,
Yes.
minus the fertiliser and the
Sure.
insecticides and
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff.
The important thing is that when you have a planning application on undeveloped land, first question the committee will ask is what sort of and there's a difference between 3A and 3B, because 3A they will say it's too valuable to develop upon,
Okay.
and 3B is a load of old rubbish, and
It's
basically
the,
4 and
it's
5
the
are
depth of soil. So because I own a farm up in May,
Yeah.
and we've got grade 4 to 3 soil, and
Right.
because Maeve's on a granite tour, we've got this about
very
a
thin.
foot and a half
Yeah.
of decaying granite, and then we've
Yeah.
probably only got about less than a foot of soil on top.
Mm.
So the more soil you've got, and the better the quality of that soil is your grade as to what
Okay.
crops you can grow on it without
Right.
as
Yeah,
much.
you'll
Right.
definitely need to know the difference between 3A and 3B,
Yeah.
Right.
because that's a
That's kind of the
Yeah.
the line.
I
as it
think
were.
3A and above you can difficult to develop on.
Right.
3B and below, yeah, you're
But then
okay.
you've got the developers who scratch off all the soil on the top
Oh,
and
God,
make
yes.
it 5 as soon as they buy it.
Oh yeah. Chop down the trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
About that.
Have I got that right?
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
So
3A
3A
and
is-
above is
Yeah.
More
you would
difficult.
look as valuable
Okay.
farmland
Yeah.
that can grow crops.
Yeah.
Right.
Therefore,
Sure.
unlikely to get planning permission.
Yeah.
3B and below, it's
Yeah, I think we're 3A.
Yeah.
Can I just ask just a few questions?
Yeah, sure.
Is this tool Land Explorer for, obviously I know you're here
Yeah.
at this climate change neighbourhood planning event,
Mm.
but could this also be used by developers to try and get their way around our towns? That's my concern, is that just as useful
they
it
want
is
to
to
purchase
us,
the
is it
land.
useful to them, and then
I mean,
they want to purchase
yeah.
the land before we get a chance as a community to do something with it?
think the simple answer to that question is yes.
Right.
That there's more nuance. There's more nuances to it.
Yeah.
Number one is developers already have this information.
Right.
Mm.
Okay.
They're paying for other software applications that already do this.
Right. Okay.
And the difference, I guess, is the other software applications that do this are owned by venture capitalists. They want to see a large return on their investment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only way they'll see a large return on their investment is by selling that data and by selling that software to for-profit developers. So prop tech and geotech is a very active kind of entrepreneurial space. And there's lots of people doing this and similar, but they're doing it with a different business model in mind.
Yeah. Okay.
So that they're kind of already doing it.
Yeah.
Will a property developer log on to this and say, oh, that's cool, I can use that? Probably. And we've got, we ask people to register, and we ask people what are you a community group? Are you in the public sector? So we try and filter users. And we've got a really nice mix, we've got sort of 72 not-for-profits, 30 odd community groups, 12 public sector organisations, 11 universities on here, and this kind of thing. And so we will specifically try to exclude, anyone using it for profit in that instance. But just knowing software and stuff, people can use a Gmail address and just fake stuff. If you really want to do it, you'll do it.
Just say you're
But-
a community
but
group and actually a developer.
Yeah, that's it. But equally, like I say, the developers have already got this,
Yes, yeah,
and they're really, really good at doing this, and they will learn where the land is first. They will have already negotiated with the council. They'll have paid an option for it,
Yeah.
and then they'll have their planning consultants working on it with all of this data,
Yeah.
probably before any of us in community groups even know about it.
No,
First thing we know about it is when there's a planning thing stuck on a post,
Yeah.
and we're like,
If you're lucky.
I'm like, yeah, and then we're like, oh, I didn't know that was for sale, So yeah, I mean, it's open to abuse, but let's use it up.
Oh yeah, I hope not. It was
Yeah,
just,
it's a good question.
interesting to see, how it could be used.
Yeah, and it's a
just
valid question.
Second question, sorry, and you
Yeah.
may come to it. When you draw your lines,
Mm.
and when you're on this mapping software, does
Yeah.
it tell you where the boundaries are to villages and things like that? and
Not at the moment.
Right.
No. So I mean, we are looking at putting on.
Because that may be useful, having actual
Yes.
parish, like,
Yeah.
And you can get
Pa-
help from Cornwall Council.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
Because they have a mapping set, quite a good mapping
Yeah.
service
Yeah.
that will do
But
that.
he was
The
asking
land
about his
ownership would
development.
be
Yeah.
really
feedback.
interesting. I
Yeah.
can't see one for land ownership there.
Yeah.
So your land ownership will basically, I presume, would be local authority, privately owned.
Yes. So I think only about 65% of land is we actually know who's registered it
Yeah.
in the UK, because it's only been since 1988 that we've had to, or it's been managed digitally, and it's only then if you sell it. So there's 35% of land that's just deeds in destrals that doesn't get sold. So we've only got about 65% in the land registry. They've got a project, I think, again by 2020 to try and expand that. And yes, that's a current piece of work that we're doing
Yeah.
that will allow you to go on here and see who owns the bit of land. For corporate and commercial ownership, that will be free, because again, as part of the Geospatial Commission, they've made that information openly accessible. So if it's a company, or if it's a council, or if it's a charity, etc., you'll be able to see it. If it's a private individual, then there's a statutory fee for a title and plan. But that kind of helps, because this field next door, that people in the village might know who farms
Yeah.
it. That doesn't mean who owns it. It might be a tenant farmer, and it's just how you start that conversation with the relevant person. They've got some really interesting laws up in Scotland. There's the Scottish Land Reform Bill in 2013 allowed for community compulsory purchase of land if it was seen as being underutilised or derelict in some fashion. You could start a process of negotiation with the landowner to take that land into community ownership to do something better with it. Now those laws haven't been tested in the EU Human Rights Court yet, and the MSPs have suggested they probably don't, because there's a lot of money, a lot of pain, a lot of hassle, but it's an interesting backdrop to negotiate with a landowner with, and there's been some very successful.
Where my mother lives, in the Highlands of Scotland.
They're actually in the procedure of, I think they've got the land now for the community, and they're going to run it as a community asset. So they're going to have
Fabulous.
livestock on it, they're going to have beehives, they're going to community allotments, orchards, and everybody is getting involved.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
They've got better access laws in Scotland too, haven't they?
They have right to roam now,
Right to
so
roam.
no trespass. No trespass. As
Yeah.
long as you're not causing any
Yeah.
damage, you can pitch your tent where you want, which I think is
Yeah.
fantastic.
To an extent, as long as it's not round Lochleven,
Right.
because there have been such a lot
Uh-huh.
of problems with people dumping rubbish.
I really. Oh, there we go.
Bonfires and so on.
yeah. So I'm going to speed up a little bit because I'm conscious we've got 10 minutes before we've got to go back in. So there we go. So we've got, yes, this is agricultural land classification. But what's I'll keep it on aerial actually for the moment. I think. What's really interesting, because you asked about these woods, that's Market Western Fen, and that's an area of special scientific interest, conservation area. It doesn't show up great on this screen. Probably shows better if I flick back to topography. So you can see this is an area of special scientific interest and a special protection area, an area of special conservation. So it's really helpful to see. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why we want to keep this as completely fallow. Because and you asked about paths. Because there is a footpath that runs from this road all the way down the side here, and then goes through the fen up here, and then also goes out to this road here. So again, what we really want is some public access to just a field of bee-friendly flowers. When I was a kid, it was mostly, it was left fallow, left for hay mostly. So we'd sort of cut it, we'd just let it grow, and then all the grasses grow, and then cut it and just dry it in the autumn. So literally with the scythe, like I say, when I say horse drawn, we did everything by hand. So we're cutting the hay by scythe. Very quickly, what I'll do is I'll just quickly demonstrate the drawing tool. And what I might do with that actually is give me a postcode, Michelle.
TR. Oh, I don't know my postcode. TR10 9JF. That's mine.
Sorry, TR10
9JF.
F for Freddy.
Yeah, that'll be the one.
There we go.
That's the one.
So let's dive in there.
Let's see my farm.
So yeah, let's dive in. Now it might not be exactly because this is just on the postcode. So I'll click.
Not a lot there.
I'll click. Well, I'll click.
You're missing a reservoir. There's
I'll
quite a
click the
big
cross off.
Oh, here we go.
So here we go. So is this your farm?
No.
No. Okay.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's-
Hang on. Right. Is that that's the Argyle. So see the brown field. We're the two green fields and the two back this way towards the
That brown
reservoir.
field. That brown field.
Yeah,
there.
This one?
that one's mine.
Ah.
Right.
Sorry. Do you want to come up? Come on. Come on, point.
I have to try. That might
Yeah, absolutely.
around it.
Absolutely. So I mean, imagine we were a neighbourhood development committee, and it starts with, well, where is everything? What land have we got? Who owns it? So this is a live interaction demonstration. So very quickly, so if you click on here and you go to draw, and we'll click polygon, and what we can do is you left click and it drops a point, and then you go to there and that finishes it.
Oh, okay.
And it's that simple, and then you can name it.
Like me, you're a bad drive.
Well, no, I'm appalling at Photoshop. I can just about make my way around.
Wow, well this is a good
That's
test
very
drive
good
then.
too, isn't it?
So there you go, and if you want to
Okay.
move the map, you can just left click and
Yeah.
drag it,
All right.
and draw around your farm, and we'll see what it looks like.
Okay, here.
Yeah.
Oh, is that not?
So just
What am I
left
doing?
click once to start drawing the polygon,
Okay. Fine.
and don't worry if you get it wrong because this is just it's just demonstration. So
Oh. Let's go. Oh, how?
And you do a
Polygon
bendy
5.
line.
if you draw in a straight line, and then if you want to go do
Yeah, you can
sort of
pull it out,
circles,
can't
you can drop as many as you want, kind of thing.
Not here.
So
How's that?
we'll just do it roughly,
Oh.
and then go back to the one where you started. That's it, and just click on that, and that'll complete it.
Wow.
There we go.
Hey, I like
There we go.
that.
Cool. I'll drive again now, and I'll just quickly show you because we've got 5 minutes, so I'm just gonna.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm glad you think it's cool. So you could click on it, and then we could call it. Does it have a name? Should we call it Michelle?
CHY.
Gemma's farm.
N-O-W.
Michelle's farm.
Sorry, CHYNOW.
ETH.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Very, very cool.
So we now know that's your farm. So it would be really interesting. Oh, and it's 15 acres. It's 6.1
I can say that.
6.1 hectares, and we can have a look at agricultural land classification.
Now you'll tell me.
Let's have a look.
Let's have a look.
So grade 3 by the looks of things.
grade
So
three.
Yeah,
ALB.
they've got to go back and reprogram that.
yeah. So so now you can start to see how this might be hopefully you can see how it might be helpful for neighbourhood development
Well,
planning.
one of the things Fiona said she was going to do is going to do a landscape analysis.
Yes.
When we started doing that, we had someone from Cornwall Council, and they basically drew bits around and said, well, that's cliff edge,
Yes.
this is managed grassland,
Right.
this is... You could do that on this.
Do that on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and just say managed, and then you give some, you go and look at all the managed grassland, or go and
Exactly.
look at the rolling
That's my job for the
farmland.
summer. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What we're actually
Great.
looking at doing is incorporating some sort of computer-aided design stuff.
Yeah.
And permaculture designers use CAD,
Yeah.
computer-aided design, and so they'll map a garden, and then they'll put the water here, and they'll drop
Yeah.
some trees and flowers here.
Yeah.
So we're looking to add that kind of thing, so you could actually use this as a design tool
Wow.
as well. And and the permaculturalists that we've talked to, they've said, wow, what would be really helpful is to know where the water goes, where the contours are, and also what biodiversity there is, and and also natural capital
Because
accounting.
you haven't quite got woodland and flood. You've got floodplain. That's what
Yeah, I mean it's a work in progress. So hopefully with the
Yeah.
support of groups like yours, we'll be able to add to it.
Because we've got the big upstream, because we've got the reservoir at the bottom of our land, there's a lot of work being done on the farms all around it as to what's draining down into the reservoir to
Oh,
stop
Sure.
them from
Can we
actually
look at
having to clean the
floodplains?
water.
Yes, we can.
Mm.
So very, very quickly, so Michelle, what I've done is I've actually saved this map, and afterwards, if you give me your email address, I'll share it with you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah? And so there's a way to collaborate between teams as well. And so really quickly, my maps, I'm going to look at a big development up in Gateshead that I'm working on. This is called Dunstan Hill. This is about a 70-acre site, and we're looking at building an agri-hood, which is a neighbourhood of net zero carbon housing built around an urban farm.
Okay.
And so again, you'll walk to work, cycle to work, and what's interesting about this is it's actually peri-urban greenbelt, which is scheduled for development. So this is the greenbelt, and Persimmon have an option on Persimmon have an option on 2/3, so they have an option on this bit. So they're going to. So this is scheduled development. It's already for housing. So but the council want to do something really interesting on this bit. So it's just it's very tentative early stage discussions at the moment. But I wanted to show you the greenbelt. The other thing that we've got for Newcastle, because that's where I'm from, so I've made a start there, is brownfield sites. So we can have a look at all the brownfield sites that are in existence. And we're also looking at mapping contaminated brownfield sites. So how we use phytoremediation by planting crops, in particular hemp, to decontaminate that land and get it back into use. So there's some really exciting things we could potentially do in terms of mapping. But the first thing is sort of finding out where it is and Joanna, what you asked about was some floods. So we'll just click on floods and have a look at floods. So if I zoom in a bit, you might be able to see it a bit better. It's easier to see on a normal
I think
screen.
the Salt Marsh Gardens is a bit of a giveaway, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the River Tyne, So again, I mean, Cambridge is a good one to look at. In the centre of Cambridge, the River Cam where it floods, this kind of thing. So this is historical flood data, and again, what we're really interested in is modelling flood risk, because that has a huge impact in terms of insurance, in terms of I can't remember who it was about. Maybe Dan, I think, talked about building on floodplains.
Yeah,
Oh no, it was the first.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was the
you
earlier.
shouldn't build on a flood.
Yeah, it's sort of yes. So it's really really helpful to know where it floods. So we've been building in handy information, and I guess what we'd like to find out moving forward, and I love your input in the future, is what can we do for you?
Mining
Yeah.
areas,
Mm.
safe zones for mining.
Sure.
We just had it in
Yeah.
May with big planning thing, and a developer had tried to get in planning permission for an area that was well within a
Well,
safe
heritage
zone.
sites, isn't it?
No. This was just it was
It's got tunnels underneath.
no. This was just literally a safe zone for mining because we've got the quarry. It's for quarry blasting. They're not because Cornwall's got the what do they call it? It's the mining. It's the safeguarding of being able to dig out what's below if necessary.
Mineral rights.
Mineral safeguarding. That's what you've got to get on there because that's really
Yeah.
for around Cornwall because
Sure.
that is dotted around the place and it
Absolutely.
extends and you know and we've managed to defeat
Yeah.
the application this
Uh-huh.
time, but that all came down to and they had drawn the line in a different place to where
Right.
it was shown on the official map on their planning application.
Sure.
So
Well, it'd be very, I mean, you know, very interesting because the ordnance survey data on this is you know pretty much millimetre accurate.
yeah,
So again, when you're looking at those borders and what's on the if you look on a title or a deed where the boundary is, we'll map that exact polygon for the boundary and stuff. Mining's interesting because we've got similar issues and questions to answer up in Northumberland.
exactly.
Huge amounts of mining that went on there.
Well, in
So
centre of
yeah.
Cornwall,
Is all that blue bit floodplain?
no. So if I flick it on and off again, so that's
Yeah, it is.
oh, so the additional. Yeah, this is the River Tyne.
Yeah.
This is a
It's
River
They've been
Tees.
happily building on floodplains, haven't they?
Yes,
But
so,
that's
yes.
the
I mean,
idea.
so
yeah.
so I mean, Ravensworth Road floods.
You wouldn't want to do
You know,
that.
that historically it floods. So yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting where you might choose to buy your house as well. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
This would be really good
Yeah.
if I was checking where I was going to buy.
Yeah. So kind of one
If I
final.
wanted to do more personally on a personal biodiversity level, this would be really great as a personal tool.
Yeah, sure.
Like, where do I want to buy?
Yeah.
What can I use the land for?
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to buy in a floodplain.
Land Explorer, do you?
Yes, you can. It's landexplorer.cc. The CC stands for Creative, where we've appropriated it to stand for Creative Commons, because it's all about sharing. Actually, geographically, it's actually the Cocoa Islands, but you know, .cc. You know, one of the, and I guess my final question as well, just as an open question, we're very interested in a sharing economy and cooperative development and democratic ownership of the kind of means of production and the software and the data that sits in that supports civil society. So I'm curious to what degree that any of you might be willing to join a co-op and pay for membership in terms of actually owning this kind of software.
Very interesting.
I think for a neighbourhood plan, it would be a possibility that we would pay a fee to have access to
I think
this
so,
while we
yes.
were doing our own mapping. If we could then print stuff off and things like that and be actually functionally be able to use it, then I think there would be a cost. But as to whether we'd want it year in, year out, I think we'd look at it as going, right, first year we start with mapping, we get this sorted, and then we may have to review to come back to you if we needed to update. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah, absolutely.
Would it be a one-off payment, or would we subscribe annually, or?
Yeah, what would the...
Yeah.
He's making it up.
Who knows?
Well, there's an element of making up as we go. As we go
I
on.
know our
Because
council.
because we can't obviously it costs money
Yeah,
to
it
do.
does.
So we're just interested in people's opinions of
I know our council have actually bought software
Mm.
or lease software
Yes.
probably, to do this. So effectively, if you came in with a better product that is cheaper,
Mm.
then yes, they would be very
Yes.
happy, I think, to
Mm.
join
Yes.
into.
Yeah.
That's what, I don't think we as
Absolutely.
individuals would do it, but a
Mm.
parish
No.
council
But
might.
as,
From
but, as,
Because it
but,
is
as,
useful.
but as groups and
Because we didn't know what to do
Yeah.
with it when we got the software. Now we're using it
Sure.
on neighbourhood plan.
Well, this is it, and it's got to be cheaper than
one-
hiring a consultant to come out and do this for
Well,
us.
this is it. I
surely.
mean, we
and it's our parish.
Yeah, well,
Mhm.
we've got a lot of very able-bodied people who
Yes.
who are going to be on our planning committee, and as
Yes.
much as I can see that other parishes have had to pay an awful lot of money for their consultant to do a lot of work,
Exactly.
I think actually we've probably got quite a lot of capable people, and I
Yes.
think
And
we might be able to
knowledge of the
save
area as
some
well.
money because we could do
Mm.
There's a
this.
lot
Mm.
of grants around, and it does help to have a consultant.
Yes, it does, but it's sort of, it depends how much control do you want to have, and I've sat in on different parishes when they're doing it, and some people hand it away.
But can I also suggest you go into the Cornwall Council, sorry about this, the
No,
Cornwall,
please don't apologise. This is
Cornwall
fascinating.
Council
I'm really
website,
interested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
search on mapping,
Okay,
MAPPING, and it's
Yeah.
not as sophisticated as this,
No.
but it's very, very good in terms of showing you, it doesn't show you, it shows you some of the countryside and things, and there are
Yes.
certain views you can do. It has a lot more views on the intranet, which not even I as a councillor can get to. But you will find that sort of thing is available on Cornwall Council for
Thank
nothing.
you. No, thank you. That's
And
great.
would with your question about like a cooperative membership subscription, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
would it a consideration be that sort of if a collection of groups kind of came to you so that we shared, almost like paid collectively to share a login, for that very reason that our group would only need it for certain aspects temporarily, and then Newquay Marine Group might need it for something, then Newquay Cliff Top Group might need it for something else.
Absolutely. I mean, really, what I'm interested in is the value.
Yeah.
Where's the
Yes.
value?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, where's the value? What support do you need? How can we provide that? You know, and it's interesting that Joanna mentioned the council, and the council provides some mapping services,
Yeah.
and the council are paying for that. But it would be interesting from my perspective if the council were ideally, I'd like them to pay for this. Yes, so you could use it,
Yeah.
and I'd like it to be cooperatively owned.
Yes.
And so everybody has voting rights essentially.
Yeah.
Time's up.
Are they telling us we
Um,
should be back?
Possibly, yeah. That's probably saying we should go back in. The ownership model is really interesting because it's cooperatively owned, but as participatory users, you'd be able to say, we want this development done, please, and these are the tools that we would like. And just one final point, Michelle, in terms of sort of getting a plan done, and that it might have a limited lifespan. What's interesting from my perspective is measurement over time. So it's all well and good saying we'll be carbon neutral by 2030, but unless we're measuring that and actually benchmarking as we go, or measuring the biodiversity or the natural capital or what have you, then targets are relatively meaningless unless you've got some progress on that. So that's Land Explorer.
Thank you very much.
I'm Julian from Shared Assets, and I'd love to stay in touch with you all. If you want to chat or anything, just come and find me.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very
How
much.
long are you in
Julian.
Cornwall
Thank
for?
you.
I'm till tomorrow.
Just come down.
No. Yes, just come down for